It's my pleasure to introduce Erin Johnson on this International Women's Day. She will have a very, very interesting program for us. And a couple of things to say about her. First of all, she brought her assistant, Austin, who's down here taking a picture. We call him a trailing friend because I guess they collaborate a lot on their projects. But the reason for the connection with Bev goes back to Zonta International and their real focus on women's rights. And Bev has a scholarship that Erin has received, and it was the first one that was granted, and it's in climate. It's a climate action scholarship. So kudos to Bev and to Zonta for that, and to Erin for being its first recipient. When you listen to Erin's program, you're going to realize that she probably doesn't have a lot of free time. At least that's what she says. If she had any, it might be that you enjoy hiking and cooking, finding time to spend brunch time with friends. She and Austin and so many others will be getting their master's degree this May. When they have their MBAs, the next goal is to travel as far as they can, as you didn't say this, but as long as the money holds out, probably. But that will take you to Southeast Asia. You said Central and South America, specifics yet to be determined. She has a four-legged housemate whose name is Vinny. And Vinny, I've been told, is orange. He is a Maine Coon cat. So I'm guessing there's a lot of fur around your house. Anyway, without further ado, here's Erin, and she'll give us the latest and greatest news from what she's working on. So welcome, Erin.
Good afternoon, everyone, and a very happy International Women's Day. I first want to extend a really huge thank you to the Boulder Rotary Club for inviting me here today. And I'm super excited to speak with you all today about the intersection of climate change, energy, and gender. Okay. So to set the stage of why I'm here to speak with you all today about climate change and gender, I'll share a little bit more background about myself. I am currently serving as a project manager at the National Renewable Energy Laboratory, also known as NREL, which is located right over there in Golden, Colorado. So at NREL specifically, I lead international clean energy projects with the United States Agency for International Development. And specifically, my work focuses on leading just and equitable clean energy transitions within developing countries. And I also have a really strong passion for advancing gender diversity in the clean energy transition. Okay, so to start the conversation today, I wanted to make sure that we're all on the same page about climate change. So when I'm talking about climate change, I'm referring to the long-term alterations in the Earth's temperatures and weather patterns. While some of these changes can occur naturally, human activity has been the primary drivers of climate change since the 1800s. And this shift can be largely attributed to the burning of fossil fuels. This includes coal, oil, and gas. So why exactly does this matter? Well, when we burn fossil fuels, this releases greenhouse gas emissions into the atmosphere. And picture these gases as a thick blanket encircling our planet. These greenhouse gases, they trap and hold the sun's heat, which then causes a rise in Earth's temperatures. And unfortunately, the impact of these rise in temperatures are far-reaching and pretty severe. We're talking about increased droughts and water shortages, wildfires, more severe storms, and a loss of biodiversity, just to name a few. And although the challenges of climate change do seem daunting, I believe it's not the end of the story. So Al Gore once said, "The good news is we can reclaim control of our destiny." So although climate change presents us with significant challenges, I think it also presents us with existing opportunities to address inequalities in the world. So I'd like you to keep this in mind for the remainder of today's discussion. So one of the most promising pathways to mitigate climate change is to shift towards renewable energy. But what is renewable energy? So in essence, renewable energy comes from sources that are naturally replenished on a human timescale. These are sources from the sun, the wind, water, and even from the Earth's core. And unlike traditional fossil fuels, we can produce energy from these renewable sources in a much more cleaner and sustainable way than traditional fossil fuels. Specifically, when we produce energy such as heat or electricity from renewable sources, this emits little to no greenhouse gas emissions. And this is extremely important if we want to help combat the rise in global temperatures and alleviate some of the impacts of climate change. Now, although we have made really significant strides in advancing renewable energy technology, we still face a really significant challenge. So the power sector, which is responsible for heat and electricity generation, has seen the largest sectoral increase in greenhouse gas emissions. In 2022 alone, the power sector emitted about 15 gigatons of carbon dioxide into our atmosphere. And this is a very high number. And the power sector is so critical to our modern way of life because the power sector is producing energy to heat our homes, as well as the electricity used to run our businesses. And if we continue relying on traditional fossil fuels to produce this heat and electricity, we're contributing to the very problem of climate change that we're trying to solve. So as we're navigating the complexities of the power sector and its contribution to climate change, it's important to highlight the role of one important stakeholder, and these are power system operators. So power system operators, their main job is to ensure that the electric grid runs smoothly. And they do this by balancing the supply of electricity with the demand from consumers. And when I say electric grid, I'm referring to power lines that you see on streets and other complicated electrical equipment that essentially transfers electricity from power plants to customers in their homes. And additionally, power system operators, they are the ones responsible for integrating new sources of energy onto the electric grid. So this includes renewable sources like wind and solar power. So now that you are all experts on the power sector and climate change, you may be wondering how this relates to gender and the role of women specifically. So climate change, it does impact men and women very differently. This is based on differences in their traditional roles, societal expectations, and their livelihoods. Women who make up the majority of the developing world's poor population, they often have lower income than men. They have less access to credit and decision-making authority and limited control over resources, and this actually increases their vulnerability to climate change. So for example, in South Africa, development experts found that men have greater access to radios, whereas women were more likely to hear weather forecasts from extension workers. So climate change in itself, it's not gender neutral, and it does have the potential to exacerbate existing inequalities. On the other hand, many male-dominated sectors, which includes energy, these sectors will be impacted by climate change as resources become scarce and supply chains are disrupted. And although women have a really key role in the energy sector as energy users, employees, or value chain participants, women are significantly excluded from energy governance and decision-making processes. So as a result, this can lead to energy projects and policies that really exclude the unique needs of women's skills, experiences, and contributions. So the good news is there are organizations and partnerships in the world that are working to address this gender and energy nexus. And one of them is the USAID NREL partnership, which I am very proud to represent today. So USAID and NREL maintain a dedicated interagency agreement, and their three goals are to accelerate the clean energy transition, to mitigate climate change, and to promote the development of resilient and equitable clean energy solutions within emerging economies. So the partnership works with USAID missions and their in-country stakeholders to identify in-country energy sector priorities and then jointly develop and implement high-impact solutions. So currently, our partnership is providing tailored technical assistance to over 30 countries around the globe, which is focused on 4 main pillars that you see on the screen here. And really notably, the USAID NREL partnership, one of our core foundational principles is gender equality. So it's at the heart of all of our activities. So moving forward, I'm going to introduce 3 really exciting initiatives that were launched by the USAID NREL partnership, and that really aims to promote gender diversity in our rapidly transforming power sector. These include the USAID NREL Gender Action Plan, the Women in Power System Transformation Program, and a just and sustainable mobility framework for transitions in the transportation sector. Okay, so diving right in, I'm excited to share that the USAID NREL partnership developed a gender action plan to really integrate the unique needs of women into our energy project designs. So the main goal of this action plan is really to promote identifying and addressing critical gender gaps within specific country contexts, and then knowing where to direct project resources where they're needed most to empower women. So the Gender Action Plan outlines 4 key methods to integrate gender considerations into project life cycles. So the first one is that we can identify new opportunities in new projects through conducting detailed gender analyses, whether that's at the country or the regional level. Secondly, for upcoming projects, we can include gender experts and in-country stakeholders really early in the project planning process to really make sure gender considerations are woven into the project framework really early in the planning phases. Third, for ongoing projects and existing work, we can re-examine our project scopes and our work plans and identify any interventions that could be added or changed to include the gender considerations into the project lifecycle. And lastly, I think this is the most exciting one. We can really learn from ongoing initiatives in the gender space that are actively addressing gender disparities in the power sector. One of these programs is the Women in Power System Transformation Program, which I'm excited to introduce next. So as countries around the world work to decarbonize their energy systems, power system operators and utilities become increasingly important because, as we saw earlier, these are the institutions responsible for integrating new sources of energy onto the electric grid. However, women's participation in the power sector is hindered by structural barriers, and they are significantly underrepresented in technical and leadership roles. Right now, women only hold 16% of board positions in the world's top 200 utility companies, and women's leadership on power sector boards grows just 1% every 3 years. So this means it could take as long as 72 years to reach just 40% women's leadership in this sector. In addition, there's also a lack of sex disaggregated data, especially in developing countries, and there's a lack of research centered around women's role in power sector employment. So it is a known fact that the clean energy transition will create new jobs, but it's also going to call for the upskilling of the existing power sector workforce. So the Women in Power System Transformation Program aims to increase gender diversity in this rapidly transforming power sector. Women in PST, as we call it for short, it is a forward-looking workforce development initiative and we aim to dramatically expand technical and leadership training opportunities for women in power system operations. So at NREL, I'm really proud to lead the Women in PST program, and we carry out our activities through 4 main pillars. Our first pillar is focused on technical training, so we really look at expanding access to experiential learning opportunities. We implement our technical training opportunities through graduate level internships. We have professional fellowship exchanges between power system operators around the globe. And lastly, we develop publicly available teaching materials. So our teaching materials, they are designed to fill gaps in existing power systems engineering curriculum. And they're also designed to prepare and inspire a greater number of women students to enter the power sector workforce. I'm also excited to share that we will have 5 Women in PST interns at NREL this summer who will be coming from Laos, Vietnam, Nepal, Senegal, and Zambia. So very excited to work with those ladies this summer. Our second and third pillar of activities, this is leadership and professional development, as well as mentorship and networking. So these 2 pillars, they're really designed to complement our technical training opportunities to really ensure that women can build professional networks, gain access to mentorship and career sponsorship, and advance their leadership skills. So Women in PST, we actually partner with a program at Johns Hopkins University. It's called the Self-Empowerment and Equity for Change Training Program. So this is an agency-based leadership program that our participants go through, and it's based on recent findings in positive psychology. This past January, we were also super excited to launch our first cohort of Women in Power System Transformation, a mentorship program. So through this mentorship program, we're connecting mentors and mentees from 28 countries around the world, and our participants come from across Asia, Africa, the Americas, and Oceania. So we're super excited to see those connections being built. And lastly, Women in PST, we do recognize that technical and leadership opportunities, they really must be accompanied by more structural and institutional changes. So our 4th pillar is carried out in partnership with USAID Engendering Industries. USAID Engendering Industries, they work with power system operators around the globe to implement targeted gender action plans and promote organizational policy changes that really encourage organizations to promote gender diversity. So through all of these exciting activities, our 3 main goals are to reduce occupational segregation in the power sector. We want to better position women to advance in their careers. And ultimately, we want to make sure that women are equal beneficiaries of the clean energy transition. So the last program here, this one's very exciting. Transport is another sector that has a very high emissions footprint. And we are at a really pivotal time right now as we are shifting towards low carbon transport options like electric vehicles. However, we have seen decades of infrastructure development that has really prioritized a one-size-fits-all approach for public transit. And because of this, this has created widespread inequities in access, affordability, as well as reliability in public transport options. And specifically, women, the elderly, and low-income communities are disproportionately impacted by these inequalities. And women, unfortunately, represent the largest group that are disproportionately impacted by today's transportation systems, which leads to a lack of access to economic opportunities and safe mobility. Women in low-income communities, they do face greater risks of accidents, sexual harassment, and violence when they take trips on public transportation. And in addition, women have a higher proportion of child care burden as well as caregiving burden, which is exacerbated by this lack of access to convenient and safe transportation. So currently, our modern transportation institutions' design, planning, and operations do not take into consideration the unique travel needs of women and girls. So this is why it's very important to look at our transportation system designs through a gender lens so that this can highlight opportunities to develop more equitable and low carbon transport options. So to address this, the USAID NREL partnership developed a framework for a just and sustainable mobility transition. And this was developed for practitioners and policymakers who are working in transportation. And there is specifically a strong focus on gender mainstreaming. So when I say gender mainstreaming, I'm referring to the development of transportation systems that are really developed with the needs of women and girls in mind, such as safe access and access to employment opportunities. So the implementation of this framework has been carried out in 2 case studies, one in South Asia and one in Latin America. So on the screen here, to the left, in New Delhi, India, there was a woman-driven e-rickshaw business that empowered women to participate in the local economy by driving other women, and at the same time, it was also helping to reduce air pollution in the city. The second case, which was in Hermosillo, Mexico, this city, they implemented a walk safe program. So they put up better lighting and calming pathways and at bus stops. And they even implemented free Wi-Fi. So this allowed women to participate more safely in the local economy. So in conclusion, I do want to say to combat climate change, it's going to take the skills and talents of everyone. So when women are allowed to bring their unique knowledge, skills, and experiences, they can strengthen collective decision-making, they can drive dynamic solutions, and increase innovative solutions to really help address urgent global challenges. So with that, I would like to thank you all for listening today, and I'm excited to hear what questions you may have.
Okay, that's better or worse. Thanks for speaking to our club. I wanted to bring up a connection between women and climate change that goes way back. And that's Eunice Newton Foote. And she discovered the connection between carbon dioxide and global warming. In 1856, we think climate change is something recent. Our awareness of it, not so. So I wonder if you would talk about the discrimination that women scientists, including Ms. Foote, faced, and how much has that changed recently, if at all?
Yeah, that's a very good question. I have to admit, I'm not an expert on the history so much of gender and climate change, but as a woman who has pursued a career in climate change, I can say, you know, there is more diverse teams. Like thinking back to my college classes in like chemistry and biology, you know, there was more men sometimes, but I think I also work for an institution. NREL puts DEI initiatives like at the forefront of hiring researchers. We have researchers also looking into like greenhouse gas accounting and air pollution and such, but I can more speak to the modern situation and what I've personally experienced, but I'd be happy to pick some of my coworkers' brains for you, because I'm sure they'd have some interesting insights. But I think we're at a better place now for sure.
Excuse me. Yeah. It seems to me, and the background in terms of why you're focusing and the benefits of getting women involved in this energy, clean energy area is important because they are a part of it. But it seems to me that there's also a fundamental premise, or at least from my perspective, that it's more likely that we will get more clean energy quicker if women are involved. And it seems to me that that's one of NREL's, priorities. And I mean, good things happen in the world when women are, empowered. And so is that fundamentally what's behind this?
Yes, absolutely. Is this short? Yeah, I think you summed it up great because I think in my presentation I touched on, we are the ones to give childbirth and such experiences like this. So, when it's all men at the table designing like a bus system and they don't put a light at the bus stop, it's like, a young mother is less likely to use public transportation. So it's just about bringing those unique experiences to the table. So I definitely agree. Great. Yeah.
Hello, hello. Okay. Given systematic sexism, how do you get these training opportunities to women? I mean, there's massive sexism in the United States. There's massive sexism in the global South. So how do you do that? And then my other question is, do you ever run into men, decision makers who are like, oh, well, don't bring in your Western values of gender equity. Just give us the grant.
Yeah, no, those are both really great questions. The first one regarding sexism, yes, that is like, obviously we face that, but we do, like in our programming, we have a really big lift to promote the participation of male allies. So by having males in our program and male proponents of gender diversity, that does help the case. Obviously, it is, especially working internationally, and I think this is going to get into your second question a bit, but just the way you frame things, say some countries that are more sensitive and they might not be as open to promoting women to higher positions of leadership, we sometimes would frame it as more of an economic opportunity, which is, sometimes it's unfortunate to reframe these things, but being culturally sensitive to what country we're working in is kind of always at the highest priority when we're developing new project work. So, and especially our engagement with USAID and gendering industries, they have a really long history of working with male-dominated industries. I've only been working with them for a year, but they have a really good foundation of engaging male allies and really addressing policy and organizational changes that often also needs a cultural change within companies and businesses themselves. So I think it's context dependent for the work that I do, but we definitely have to come in with that like bipartisan approach and framing sometimes, rather than saying, okay, we need more women in leadership. People are not going to be receptive to that. So I think it's around framing the issue, and there's obviously multiple benefits of having more gender diversity within leadership teams. So yeah, cultural intelligence, I think framing and addressing the structural issues.
Hi. Thank you for your presentation, and thank you for your work and raising awareness about this topic. And just reminds me of an experience I had. I served in the Peace Corps over in Nepal, and I'm an arborist. I work in tree care. When I lived in Nepal, most of the people were subsistence, living off the land, and tree climbing was largely done by women, in that country, to harvest the branches for fodder for animals. And, taking what your work and thinking about our industries, like in the US, tree climbing is largely a male-dominated industry. And then specifically within the energy sector, there's a lot of vegetation management to maintain, power distribution systems. And the crews that do that are largely, it's almost all male crews, and those are private companies that are hired by the utility. And I'm just curious, how would NREL engage with those sectors, or would the programs that you're involved with interact with that to initiate change or to influence that?
Yeah, can I ask you a clarifying question? would this be primarily in the United States or just male-dominated sectors?
Yeah,
in general?
yeah. The question is really around our context in the U.S. Like these, here's an energy sector industry that's largely male-dominated, and I know within like the private side, the residential side, we're seeing a lot of change to enroll and attract women into our industry. But I'm just curious about that energy sector. If there are programs or initiatives or how that might work.
Yeah, no, great question. I am primarily focused on the international side, but a really big hot topic in research right now is the topic of energy justice, and especially serving like low-income communities. But this topic of energy justice, I'm not an expert on it, but it is very like far-spanning. And I think this would be a case because part of what some of my colleagues do for energy justice work is they look at those male-dominated sectors, especially in the lens of the United States. And I think similar to Women in PST, you can still apply like similar programming approaches, just adapt it to specific contexts. So what you were just explaining to me, if it's a male-dominated sector, even things like mentorship and just having women experience these jobs or get the opportunity could apply in the US as well. Sorry, I don't have a clear answer to the US, but I think you should look into energy justice, and NREL has some really cool papers on that. Yeah.
Thank you. Oh, gosh. Hi. I'm an NREL retiree, and back in the 2000s, we were working on gender, energy, and poverty. And this was not a large effort at all, but we were concerned about these things. And we were thinking more in terms of distributed electricity than utility scale, and also cooking as a key area of concern. The Three Stone fires and all of the indoor and outdoor air quality issues. And I didn't hear any mention of that in your presentation. So I don't know if you are doing anything with IAD in that area. But if you're not, I would ask you to think about that. And as you go forward, to try to build more of that in, because it remains an enormous global issue. And it affects climate change. Thank you.
Yeah, that's a really great point. It's funny, this week actually, some of my colleagues put in a proposal for clean cooking, and the clean cook stoves was a really big thing for a while, but now we're looking into, what are they called? Pressure cookers, like clean pressure cookers. Those are kind of the up and coming technology. So we do have teams. This was only like 3 projects out of our gender portfolio, but we definitely have some clean cooking initiatives. And I work with some amazing people. One of my coworkers, Suda, she was actually on the ground in Zambia doing some clean cooking research. So it remains a very important topic today. So thank you.
So I think your program, Women in PST, is fantastic and needs to be replicated and scaled up. And I'm wondering, what are the prospects for that happening in other organizations or within your organization?
That is a very good question. So yes, this program is only 3 years old, so we are heavily focused on business development effort and fundraising. It has primarily been a USAID funded program, but I came in as the program lead about a year ago, so I really want to shift towards looking to private sector and just other types of institutions. The government is great, but it can move slowly sometimes in terms of funding. So yes, we are actively looking to scale the program. We do have a really big funding opportunity through USAID that we'll find out about later today. So that will be scaling the program in Southeast Asia specifically. But yes, if you want to chat after about strategies to scale this type of program, I would love to hear any creative thoughts.
Great. We have time for one more question.
Okay.
Thank you so much for coming to speak with us. My question, I'm a lawyer by background, right? And law school now is more women than men. And I know we had a talk probably a year or two ago from a woman who was talking about trying to get girls into STEM. I'm curious, obviously, to pull people into that sector, they have to be educated and trained in that sector. How are things going with the balance of women's involvement in STEM and in particular renewables? And is it trending in the right direction?
Yeah, that's a very good question. This is actually an area because my program, we do target like the graduate level students, which is not early enough to get more women into STEM. But I think it is, especially in the clean energy sector from an international standpoint, we're not there. I can't speak as much to the US, but one activity that we're trying to scale up a bit more is like we have promotional videos and inspiring like 2-minute, like the TikTok length or like Instagram Reel videos to really target that like K-12 audience. And this is, if this funding award from USAID is successful, like we're going to look into, you know, having a professional engineer go into a high school or middle school classroom. So I think that is actually, it's usually one of the biggest areas where folks kind of struggle to understand how we scale up more, but we're kind of there at the college and graduate level, but I think it's even more important to go to that middle and high school level. So still a lot of work to be done, but there are people out there doing it.
Thank you so much. We have to conclude today, but I want to thank two people. First, I want to thank Pam Malsbender, former Rotarian of our club, who brought you to us today. So thank you, Pam. So Erin, thank you. On this International Women's Day, it's been our club's pleasure to give the podium to a young rising star like you. It's been so inspiring to learn about the crucial leadership role that you're personally playing in combating climate change through clean energy solutions. We're all really appreciative and really impressed. So Rotary has been working to eradicate polio for more than 35 years. Our goal of ridding the world of this disease is very, very close. And in your honor, the Boulder Rotary Club is pleased to contribute 100 doses of vaccine to the Polio Plus Fund. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. That's amazing.